Tonight, DC really wants you to read Team 7 because these paramilitary team books never get cancelled, right? It's Guy Gardner meets The Wire as we see life of a space cop in downtown Baltimore. And we can't have a Ravagers origin without the culling and harvest. God damn it. All that and more tonight on the Not So New 52. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 54 of the Not So New 52. I am your host and we're continuing on with Zero Month in an extremely packed week. There are 15 comics this week that I have to get through. I haven't had to do that since like month 2. So I'm just going to tell you the comics that are coming out, mention a few cool things, and we're going to jump right into it, alright? So, this week, we have the number 0 issues of Batman, Batman and Robin, Batgirl, Superboy, Green Lantern Corps, Deathstroke, Grifter, Suicide Squad, Team 7, Legion Lost, The Ravagers, Demon Knights, Frankenstein, and Resurrection Man. Additionally, we have the number 12 issue of the S.H.A.D.E, and that means that the S.H.A.D.E and Resurrection Man both have their final issues this month, so be sure to listen in for that. Additionally, you may have noticed I said Team 7, number 0. For anyone who's been watching the show, you may have heard me mention Team 7 before. This is their first issue. This is their debut. And I gotta tell you, spoiler, I don't get it. I don't understand what's special about Team 7 yet. I'm sure we'll get there, but I genuinely am confused by it. But regardless, let's not waste any more time. Let's get into this week's Bat Books. Batman number 0, written by Scott Snyder, art by Greg Capullo. This is just an early Batman story. Not going back to his parents in the alley, it's just, here's what Batman did before he was Batman. So, we open up in Gotham City 6 years ago. We're at Gotham National Bank, and I guess they're having a grand reopening where they're serving cake and coffee. And wouldn't you know it, but a group calling themselves the Red Hood Gang shows up and says, hey, we used to rob the old Gotham National Bank. We're here to rob the new ones, and we pray that nothing will change. So everyone get on the ground, and we'll be in and out of here. And the bank manager's just like, oh, you have no right. And the leader of the Red Hood gang, Red Hood 1, he throws over a gun to one of his subordinates and says, like, hey, kill that guy. And then, he says, put him down, to which the other member of the Red Hood gang just bashes him over the head with a gun. Not killing him, just bashing him over the head. To which Red Hood 1 is then like, okay, hey, take that gun and blow your brains out. And he's like, what? Why would it? But you said to put him down. It's like, yeah, but the real Red Hood number 5, which is who you are, would always take the opportunity to kill someone rather than non-lethal means. Also, the real Red Hood number 5 is left-handed and you're right-handed. So he's already deduced that this is not the real guy. Some sort of police officer or something like that must have something on the actual one. And he's like, okay, fine, I'll do it. I'll kill myself. Just don't hurt anybody else here. And he's like, what do you mean don't? We poisoned the cake. Everyone here is dead already. And so he's like, oh, geez, oh, gosh. And he puts the gun in his mouth, but then he's like, all right, whatever. And he just starts fighting off all the Red Hood gang. And we see that it is Bruce. He's got his internal monologue going. And he's like, I was so anxious to just get in here and stop them before the robbery that I didn't study. I was stupid. But regardless, I gotta stop him now. So he tries to fight back against him. He throws a smoke bomb in order to make his escape. But as he's making his way out of the bank, he sees the police are already there. They're opening fire on the Red Hood gang. Red Hood gang's opening fire on them. He's just caught in the crossfire. So he ducks his way underneath a cop car. And when another cop goes and looks to see him being under there, it turns out he made his way down into the sewers underneath. And we see Bruce takes off his disguise. Really, it was just like a goatee, but apparently it was like a full face disguise. And he pulls down a motorcycle that he had hidden here in the sewer. And as the Red Hood gang starts shooting out after him, he makes his way down the sewer tunnel, calls to Alfred that he needs the back door opened up. And Alfred's having problems on the computer. He's not used to it, but he does manage to get it open in time. So then we open up to the Batcave, but it's not at Wayne Manor. It turns out that Bruce is like, nope, I'm not going there anymore. That's not my home. I left that behind. I am working downtown, like right next to Crime Alley, because that's where my city needs me. And Alfred's like, okay, but like maybe Bruce Wayne could be a better influence if he was, rich or whatever and could just solve some problems. Also, people know you came back to town. If they realize that there's a vigilante going around at the same time Bruce Wayne comes around and you're not playing up the Playboy aesthetic, people are going to figure it out. And he's like, yeah, okay, I'll think about it, Alfred. But he's like, nah, I'm not going to. So Alfred just goes in, just telling him, like, oh, you, Master Wayne, please. And Bruce tells him, like, no, you know what I need? I need this. And he holds up a boomerang that has an auto recall feature on it somehow. And he goes up to the roof of the building that he's working out of. And he's just working on the timer, seeing how it comes back. And he throws it out with a 4-minute delay. And right as he does so, Jim Gordon shows up, wanting to talk to Bruce. And this is the first time they've apparently spoken to each other. And meanwhile, this boomerang is sitting in the wall, like ready to recall in 4 minutes. The timer's constantly counting down. And Jim's just like, this will only take a second, but do you mind if I have a smoke? And Bruce is like, I guess so, sure. So basically Jim's just up there saying, hey, look, I've done some looking into Wayne Enterprises. Your uncle runs it now, and he's a little bit shady. Have you heard anything at all? And it's like, Mr. Gordon, that's my father, or my uncle. That's my family. I don't think that that's really appropriate at all. And he's like, I get it, but just keep an eye out, please, if you could. It'd be really helpful. Also, have you heard about this vigilante going around? And Bruce is like, nah, I mean, yes, I've heard it, but I don't know anything about it. And he's like, yeah, well, someone like you, someone who's just come back into town, living now in this part of town, you might actually come to respect the vigilante, but please don't. Anyone who helps him is going to be arrested. So keep your rich boy money to yourself. Got it? And he's like, yeah, sure, totally. Hey, how about we go downstairs? And so they hop in the elevator, and as the elevator door is closing, the boomerang recalls and gets stuck in it. So just barely made it out. And then our last page here is Red Hood Gang, who is stalking out where Bruce Wayne is currently living. And we see that the leader, Red Hood 1, is going to blow the place sky high. And all of this story is to be continued in the 0-year event, which is not for another, year. We've got a long time until this one actually comes back. So, overall, it was good. It was a solid little issue. It was a good tease of future stuff. It's weird in that it was 6 years ago, but it's a good tease of a future storyline that's going to be coming up, because obviously this isn't what we're going to be dealing with next. Overall, I mean, it was Batman has been at a high standard. It's nice to see that. I think this is pretty much one of the first things that we're doing that's not super Court of Owl centric. So we are moving on to a different part of it, and it is, of course, Bruce's origin. So overall, I'm liking it. Scott Snyder does a great job. Greg Capullo's arts are fantastic. It did a good job of walking it through while still making it feel seamless. It was talking about big ideas, but still making it very easily understandable. So overall, I'd say this one's an 8.5. I really do enjoy this particular Zero issue. Looking forward to seeing where the story spins out from there. Batman and Robin number 0, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Patrick Gleason. This is a Damian origin story, and it basically just leads up to how did he come to meet Batman. I don't know if this has actually been covered before in pre-New 52, but here it is here. So we open up a year and a half ago. Damian's fighting off ninjas and giant man bats, and he's just making quick work of them, and he's like, all right, Mom, no more secrets. So then we cut back to his birth, where he was, of course, grown in an artificial womb, an incubator, and he's let out, and immediately Talia takes him to a pool and just sets him down in it. And one of the nurses is just like, maybe don't drown the baby, ma'am. And Talia just throws a knife into her throat and says all right, someone get another nurse for my son and don't ever talk back to me again. And Damian, because she was bleeding out in the pool, he comes out, he's covered in blood as a baby, and he's just like, welcome to the world. So then we see Damian as, can only be 3 years old or so, sparring with his mother with some wooden swords, and basically they get on the topic of, hey, who was my father? Why don't you talk about my dad? And she's like, I have no reason to talk about your dad. He means nothing to you right now. One day he will, but right now he's not important. She's like, but I wanna hear about it. She's like, how about this? The day that every year on your birthday, we're gonna spar. We're gonna have a duel. And the day that you best me in that duel is the day that I will reveal the secrets about your father. And immediately she gets a call from Otto Netz, who I believe is going to be coming about in Batman Incorporated, about some big thing that she's working on called a Metabomb. And Damian makes his way into a trunk that has a bat cowl and cape in it, and he puts it on. And when Talia comes back, it's just like, oh, look at the little bat. But here's the thing, you're not just a bat, you're also the demon's head, so pay attention here. And shows him this map of the world and says, like, one day you're going to rule over all this because that's your divine mission. You are going to tame the world's chaos. So then we see just a compilation of Damian training and losing his birthday duels to his mother just over and over and over again as he gets older and older, until finally we open up on his 10th birthday, where he is literally jumping out of a plane to try to catch his mother by surprise. And she's already seen it coming. She's like, yeah, no, whatever. We've got ninjas up there. And she sends ninjas like paradiving after him, to which he just opens up with machine guns and shoots them all. And the few that he misses, he opens up one of their parachutes, which catch the rest of them in the chute itself. So they all fall to the earth. He then glides down, and we see the opening where he attacks a few ninjas and a giant man bat that Talia has sicked after him. And of course, no problem there at all. And then finally, he makes his way to the compound where his mother is and says, like, hey, I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to beat you. And she's like, big words. Let's see it. So they end up fighting. And it is just a knockout, drag-out fight here until finally Damian does, bloodied and beaten, manage to get the upper hand on his mother. And she's like, all right, I will take you to your father. Let's go to London. So they make their way in a submarine, and it looks like there are just a whole lot of dead bodies underwater here. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'm supposed to recognize them. Regardless, he still has the bat cowl, and he's asking his mom, like, why are you keeping this? Like, why, if it's something that you don't care about anymore, why are you keeping this? It's like, oh, well, because it reminds me that I saw both sides of your father, much the same way that he saw both sides of me, and we still managed to have at least a short something there. But regardless, we are going to be arriving in London. So we see that Talia sicked a bunch of man-bats on Batman, managed to coerce him, get him down, and Talia steps up and introduces Damian and says, like, hey, here's the deal. Damian's getting to be a little bit much for me to handle. I need you to guide him at this critical point in his life to make him the true heir to Ra's al Ghul's throne. So you're up, Batman. And then we see Damian step up, sword to his father's throat, and says, like, Father, I imagined you were taller. And that's it. That is the entire intro to Damian. I like it. I think it's a good intro. I think that it sets up Damian's character well, of his ruthlessness, while also that longing for the father figure, that longing to have that character there. And also just how he wasn't born this way. Like, he was very innocent to start with. Like, he just put on the bat outfit and he's like, hey, mama, look, I'm a bat. Literally, that was his phrase. I like how it did show that he's not irredeemable, or he's not irredeemable, yeah. So, no, it was a solid issue throughout. Patrick Gleason's art's very good. There are a few shaky times where I think the inks get a bit too heavy, but that's just a personal style thing. I do recognize that it is good art, however. So overall, I'd say this is probably a 7.5. I think that the only flaw that it really falls into is that because I know that Damian existed pre-New 52, and therefore this was not allowed to be its own, like, original origin story. He wasn't allowed to put his own twist on it. It was literally, you have to work up to this point, which is still technically, I guess, in continuity. So it felt a little bit hampered by that, where it was just like, no, he has to be 10 years old, he has to do this. It has to lead up to that point. He did a lot with it, but there was still a little bit of, you have to get to this particular point here. So 7.5, though, I still really did enjoy it. Batgirl number 0, written by Gail, Simone, art by Ed Benes. This is just Origin of Batgirl, straight and simple. So we open up 4 years ago with Barbara Gordon. She's laying in bed cutting out newspaper clippings of how her father was so successful as a cop and how she just admires him, how he's always her hero. And then we see all the things she does. She does ballet, she does like self-defense, and we gather that people always say that she's intense. She's very, very focused and very driven to an almost scary extent. And she reaches out to her dad saying like, hey, I'm taking this criminology course. I really want to put a mark on it. Maybe you could have somebody give me a tour around GCPD. And he's like, yeah, sure. Also, we're going to bring your brother along because James Gordon Jr. is here. So she grabs a random cop named Officer Dwight and just tells him, hey, just guide my daughter around, walk her through the process, show her how we do things. So Officer Dwight takes the pair of them around, and immediately James Gordon Jr. is like, you're up to something, aren't you? And he's like, maybe. I don't know. You gonna brat? And he's like, no, I don't talk to anybody. So make their way through, and they look at like, oh, this is how we file paperwork, and this is the blue folders mean that this is done on a Tuesday. And she's like, yeah, okay, I don't actually care about any of this. There's actually a real reason I'm here. And they make their way past a office where basically the police are putting together a profile for Batman. And they manage to figure out, like, okay, here's the deal. We've got plenty of unconfirmed sightings. We don't have a lot of info as to like who he is, what he's doing, but we do think that he is just a guy with a lot of tech, and he's not like anything super special. And Barbara's just looking in on this, and she's like, oh my God, that's fantastic. Like, yeah, Batman is super cool to me, and he's just a guy. He's just smart like me. I couldn't do this. I could do that same thing. So super happy about that. But before she has that much time to revel in it, this big guy comes in. His name is Harry X. They make special point that he's Canadian. Okay. And he's just this brute who apparently killed like a lot of people by breaking their necks. And he steps up and talks to Barbara and says like, well, hey there, I can see you. I know what you are. And it's just like, okay. And he's like, oh, I mean, like, yeah. And also James Gordon Jr. has a lot of issues as well. I can see that as well. It's like, all right, well, whatever. Do you want something, mister? And it's just like, oh, yeah, sorry. Here's the thing. You just need training, and maybe I'll come for you one day, and you can work under me. It's just like, yeah, okay, sure. But before he can make his way back into the cell, explosion happens, and it's this breakout attempt to get Harry X out by his cult of seemingly all-female like East European people. Like, I don't know. I have no idea. This came out of nowhere, and they really don't even ever cover it again. It's just a breakout attempt. So Barbara and James Gordon Jr. go and hide. I'm just going to call him Junior from now on. And Junior is like, he doesn't even care. He's just like, yeah, I'm not that scared. This is whatever. Just full sociopath. But Barbara's like, okay, I can figure it out. I can figure out what to do here. So they make their way back to a stairwell where there's only one entrance that Harry X can come from. She throws a chair at him when he opens up the door. Junior runs away so that Barbara's able to like barricade and manage to move farther away. And before she can really get anywhere, Harry X catches up, lays some hurt on her, and we see that Officer Dwight, he's like, Miss Gordon, get down, tackles Harry. And Harry's like, hey, I'm going to kill this cop, and it's all your fault because you ran away from me. And he straight up does. Like, I'm not sure if he 100% actually gets there, but he's gurgling on his own blood. So at that point, Barbara's like, okay, I got to do something. Let me figure this out. And she sees the makeshift bat costume that the GCPD has put together. And we see outside Jim is there, and he's like, oh, my girl's in there. You got to help me. Let me in. And he's like, no, Commissioner, it's too dangerous. So then we see inside, Barbara's put on the bat costume and is confident enough to overcome Harry, manages to lay some hurt down on him. And as he goes down, Batman shows up, and he's like, hey, did you do this? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, wow, good work. Also, you saved the officer. So I guess Dwight is alive. And so he just walks off and makes sure that Officer Dwight gets help. And make sure that Harry is fully restrained. And she puts away the costume and meets back up with Junior. And Junior's like, well, that was interesting. So then we just get a flash montage for the next year of her life. She continued doing Batgirl stuff. She got her own outfit. She did end up working with Batman. And that went on for a full year, and she enjoyed every moment of it. But then at a certain point, she was like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should do something else in my life. And apparently she did mess up at some point, but she doesn't get too into it. So she takes off the cape and cowl. She gets into college. She even finds somebody that she's interested in romantically. And she's like, yeah, no, I made something in my life, and I was able to actually get out of it. Until that one fateful night. There's a knock at the door, and the Joker's there. And then she gets shot, but they don't show that part. So yeah, that's Barbara's origin. I don't know. I don't dislike it. I don't dislike the fact that she was interested in Batman and she had a chance to prove herself, and then Batman noticed. I don't dislike any of that. That was fine. It was just weird to me, this whole like Harry X thing. Like, they put a lot of emphasis on like, no, he's like a cult leader and he also murders all these women and we just caught him. And it's like, I don't know. There was a lot going on there. It wasn't awful, but there was a lot. It felt like a bit too much in terms of showing the first interaction with Batman. Like, they had to justify it. So overall, it is still good. I would go ahead and give it a 7. It's not blowing me away, of course, but it is still a decent origin to Barbara Gordon's Batgirl. And honestly, I feel like the last 2-3 pages of just the montage of saying like, and I did amazing things, was more interesting than most of the first half of the issue there. So take of that what you will, but I give it a 7. Superboy number 0, written by Tom DeFalco, art by R.B. Silva. So we kind of saw Superboy from birth in his own series, so it's kind of weird to give an origin issue. So instead what they do is they split this up twofold, where they expand ever so slightly on his actual origin itself, and then they give the origin of the term Khan in Kryptonian, where all of like Kryptonian clones and whatnot. They intersperse this together. I'm just going to tell you half and half of how it works. So first story is the Kryptonian clones. And basically the way that it went is that on Krypton, they were trying to do space flight, and because the gravity was so massive on the planet, everyone was dying due to G-forces. So they made a bunch of clones so that, like, you know, they could just test it out on meat without it worrying. And a bunch of those were failures, but they did eventually manage to make it out of the atmosphere. But then with the cloning technology, they were like, hey, we could use this in medicine, and we can use this for labor, and we can use this for all these different reasons. So they mass-produced a whole lot of clones. However, apparently there was a flaw in the cloning process that made it so that the clones had a very poor impulse control problem, and they ended up turning on their creators very rapidly, and there was this mass revolution, all the clones turning on their creators, and there was one clone either named Khan or took the name of Khan, and he was like more brutal and more merciless than anybody else, and so he ended up taking the fight to the Kryptonians, and he had some early victories, but in the end they started losing a lot. So then they thought, hey, the weather is controlled on Krypton via machines. Let's go steal those machines and turn them against our creators. And so they launched an attack on that, causing irreparable damage to Krypton's climate. They were still defeated. It didn't work. However, nobody ever found Khan's body. But when all the dust cleared, the climate was still in shambles, and it ended up being such an issue for the planet as a whole that, of course, Krypton ended up exploding not long afterwards. Also, there was something about a doomsday cult that spawned up in the meantime. They only give it one panel of notice. I don't know if it'll be important, but there it is. Also, apparently, there was an inner circle of the leadership of the clone army, and someone betrayed Khan. So yeah, that's all the clone story. Now, the whole reason that we know about this, because it is being told as a story, is that Harvest, you remember Harvest? Good old Harvest. He is talking to his like first mates, I guess you would say, whatever it is. And he's basically saying like, hey, I found some old Kryptonian artifacts and legends and such, and this is what they said. Maybe they're true. I believe it. But regardless, I'm hoping that I can get that same thing out of this experiment. And they go through how he's been watching this guy the whole time, and he thinks that Superboy is really, truly something special, and he will become the greatest weapon for Harvest. And when they see that he's not responding, like he's not waking up, they're going to shut down the whole project. But Harvest is like, oh no, let him try to shut it down. I bet he's going to explode. And then he explodes. And Caitlin Fairchild is like, oh no, Superboy, I will help train you or whatever. So then they show the whole thing where Superboy goes into like VR and they try to train him with like, morals and stuff like that. Of trying to get him to understand that good is good and bad is bad and not to be so apathetic to everything. But then it turns out that during those VR things, that's training for his conscious mind. In his subconscious mind, Harvest is feeding him imagery of like him ruling over Krypton, and also that Superman's like beating him up mercilessly. So that way it can like subconsciously further his psychosis and make him truly believe that he doesn't belong, making him easier to control. And that's it. That really is. And the final page here is, it is only a matter of time before his true nature is unleashed, and whether he intends it or not, his actions will play right into my hands. Because if you remember Harvest during the culling, he literally planned for everything. He literally knew absolutely everything that was going to happen, and he was always right. And that was the most annoying part about him. And to have him show back up here is not cool. Anyway, Superboy's number 0 is fine, I guess. Like, I'm interested in the clone revolt on Krypton. That sounds interesting to me, especially because it's a direct line between that to Krypton blowing up. Like, it's good. But that's not what this book is. This book is following now with Superboy, so I'm not going to get any more of that. Honestly, this didn't really do that much. Like, yes, I like the mythology dump on like why Krypton blew up, but for Superboy itself, whatever. Like, he's already rejected Harvest. We've seen this arc happen. We didn't get any new information. The only thing is that, it actually is right according to Harvest's plan, to which point I say, dude, friggin' everything is part of Harvest's plan, apparently. He's literally planned for every single thing, so I'm not surprised. So, yeah, no, it's okay. It's not offensively bad. It's just, like, whatever. So, I'd say this is a 6. I can't bring myself to care any more about it than that. Art is fine as well, but, Green Lantern Corps number 0, written by Peter Tomasi, art by Fernando Pasarin. This is Guy Gardner's origin, and who boy an origin it is. So we open up on a training outpost sector in Sector 3599, and we just see a bunch of Green Lantern trainees all fighting against this horrible, awful threat named Czar. And he's just killing these trainees left and right. And Guy Gardner's there in the middle, and all the trainees are like, should we, like, run? And Guy's like, no, we stay and we fight until our dying breath. And he, as all of the trainees around him are killed, he's the only one still firing. And Czar comes up and just grabs him by the head, knocks him out, and says like, yeah, no, so I'm like live streaming this to the rest of my planet. I thought you guys would be a better fight, but hey, I'm sure they're looking forward to hearing you scream. And then we get a flashback to 3 months beforehand. Guy's brother and sister are both cops, and his sister's graduated from the police academy, Baltimore Police Academy, and he's off on his motorcycle way far away watching his brother, his sister, and his father just enjoy the day. They're like, oh, well, I really wish your mother was here to see this, but I'm sure she'd be proud of you. I'm so happy you're here and all that stuff. And then as Guy's walking on, his brother's partner named Marcus sees him and it's just like, hey, what are you doing over here? Don't tell me you're leaving already. You got to come over, say hi to everyone. And Guy's like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess, sure. So he's guided over, and immediately his sister's happy to see him, his brother's happy to see him, but his dad is like, well, that's my cue to go, bye. And as he makes his way back to the car, guy's like, what's the matter, Dad? No hug for your son? Oh, that's right, I'm dead to you. I'm just a spooky ghost. Ooh. And the dad just pushes past him, get in the car. And the rest of the family just talks for a little bit. And they say, like, oh, whatever to him. Like, he's his own thing. But I'm proud of you, sis, and whatever. And they all share a nice little family photo that Marcus takes. And sister's got to go out to a class party that's going on in a few hours. And Marcus and Guy's brother, who they have their names. I can't remember them at the moment, but we'll get to it. They got their shift to start in a few minutes, so they get ready to go. And his brother passes him some tickets to an Orioles game and says, "Hey, go make up with Dad. Like, it's been long enough. Just go do it." So we see later that night he goes to his dad's place and says, like, "Hey, I got tickets to the game. Do you want to go?" And the dad's like, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll just pretend like everything's okay. Sure, why not? And his dad was a decorated cop, and he's just sitting at home listening to the police scanner. And basically they just get into an argument. They're just a whole thing where Guy apparently, something happened where innocent people died while he was a cop, and he was forced off of the police force. And his dad was part of a long line of cops that he wanted his family to continue, and he sees Guy's failure here as just a black mark on the family legacy, and he doesn't want anything to do with Guy anymore. He's just like, no, you're straight up dead to me. So at that point, by the way, his brother's name is Gerard, and I still am blanking on it. Gloria is the sister's name. So they get into more and more of an argument. Dad's been drinking. He ends up dozing off as he's yelling at Guy. Guy takes his cane and just smashes all of the pictures on his wall as the police scanner continues to go off, and he says that there's a shooting just a few blocks away and an officer is down. And because of where it is, Guy puts together like, oh crap, that's probably my brother. So he makes his way out the door, and we do see his brother is pinned down in just some heavy fire. He's calling for backup. It's not coming. And as he gets shot a few times in like the shoulder and the legs, the guys who were shooting at him, part of some drug operation, they say like, hey, we paid everybody off that we needed to. Maybe you didn't get the memo, but that's why your backup's not coming and you're going to die here. And Gerard begs. He's like, please, no, don't shoot me. I don't want to die. And on that note, Guy comes up on his motorcycle and just mows down these guys. They all start getting up, and he pulls out the cane that he was using to beat up his dad's stuff and starts beating them all up as well. But then he ends up getting like a knife to the leg and whatever. So he retreats back to the cop car, pulls his brother inside, sees that the partner, Marcus, is already dead. He's been shot in the passenger seat, and he just starts rapidly peeling out as best he can, getting out of the situation. And as they're cruising down the highway trying to get to the hospital in order to save his brother's life, Green Lantern ring shows up, puts itself onto Guy's finger, and he's like, you have the ability to overcome great fear. Welcome to the Green Lantern Corps. And he's like, are you kidding me? Like, right now? And so he just asks him, like, what can you do? And he's like, I can do whatever you can imagine. He's like, all right, I imagine we're at a hospital saving my brother. And then we just see Guy, he picks up his brother, and Marcus flies to the hospital, puts them both into beds, and saves their lives, or at least saves Gerard's life. Marcus is already gone. So we see sometime the next day, Gerard's waking up. Guy's still got the lantern ring, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm a Green Lantern now. I'm a space cop. I'm back on the force, and I'm not ever gonna let any evildoers out of my sight." So then we cut back to, I guess, what you'd call current day, where Guy's still unconscious from Czar, and Czar's like, "Hey, I'm going to kill you in front of my live stream. And personally, I would have liked to kill a better Green Lantern because you're such a second-rate, know-nothing lantern." And Guy hears that, and he is pissed. And he immediately fights off against Czar, takes him out, and he's able to incarcerate him back on planet Oa inside one of the science cells. And Kilowog, he's next to Guy, and he's like, all right, Guy, come on, let's go. So they go back to the top of the Green Lantern power battery, and Kilowog just tells him, like, look, you did a great job. And normally I'd wait for a graduation day with the rest of the Lantern Corps, but you did such an amazing job. yeah, you're in. You're part of the Green Lantern Corps, and he officially signs him in. And Guy's like, I love it, although I'm gonna have to change up this outfit. And he puts on his new vest-looking outfit, and he's like, now this is more like it. And at that point, Hal Jordan shows up, shakes hands with Guy, and Guy's like, oh, hey, Harold, right? Yeah, I've heard a lot about you. And Hal's like, oh, really? And he's like, no, Superman and Wonder Woman get all the good press. And Hal's like, oh, okay, well, nice jacket. He's like, oh, yeah, you like it? No, I don't. And so they fly off, already starting a rivalry, going to get some drinks on Oa. I like it. I really do enjoy it. Guy Gardner, I think, is pretty much... I mean, John and Guy really do share this title, but I think Guy, he's got a lot of character growth going on, and I think this was a beautiful way to show like where he came from, how to get everything forward in that regard. It's just solid writing, solid art all throughout. I really don't fault anything in here. So overall, I'd say this is probably an 8. I think it's very well, 8.5, honestly. I really do enjoy it. I think this is a solid work, and I am always looking forward to seeing how it evolves from there. Deathstroke number 0, Rob Liefeld and Rob Liefeld doing the Rob Liefeld. And this is dense as hell, so I'm just going to move very swiftly through it. Slade Wilson, he lied about his age, got into the Army at age 16, and immediately became a decorated war hero. And as he made through the batch, he was noticed by his superiors, and particularly one woman named Adelaide, who is the one who's narrating all this, and immediately picks him out for like special combat training and whatnot. And she's like, oh, he just sees me as a woman, so I have to prove myself. And so she does some cool flips and stuff. And Slade is like, yep, I trust you now. So he becomes member of an elite team called Team 7, who has their own book now. And I'm not even going to bother. It just shows they go on a mission, and at some point in their missions, Slade, who has aged up by now, he's got gray hair and whatnot, he's knocked out, and he's probably not going to live, but they do some genetic manipulation on him and basically turn him into a super soldier. And at this point, Slade is like, maybe I'm not so trusting of the government as a whole anymore, but he's still, kind of there in the army. And he falls in love with Adelaide. They get married, and they end up having 2 kids. But before that particularly happens, one of his old teammates, Wintergreen, was taken prisoner in Somalia. He asked the government for help. They said no, so he went on a Black Ops mission all by himself, and he put on what would become the Deathstroke costume, although with a gray mask, and he went in and he just slayed them all. He just took them all out, and that's when Deathstroke the Terminator was born. And of course, as he was becoming more apathetic towards the government, and he started saying like, okay, here's the thing. People heard about how cool I was as Deathstroke Terminator, and now I'm getting like private contracts and stuff like that from governments all over the world, and he wants to be able to provide for his family, so he says, sure, why not? And Adelaide's like, here's the thing. I think when they did that experiment, they messed with his brain and made him more like angry, because that's not the man I fell in love with. That's a different man now. So already there's a little bit of growing tension there. But over the years, he did incredible work. He got into North Korea, disrupted their nuclear weapons, and he just did crazy stuff. And Adelaide calls him out, and it's just like, you're not the man I married. You're putting us all in harm's way, because, he's getting well known as Slade Wilson, a.k.a. Deathstroke Terminator. Until one night, some North Korean operatives break into his house, and he's not there. Wintergreen's son, Peabody, is, along with Adelaide, and Grant, their other son, and I guess Joseph is there as well. But regardless, they end up firing a rocket launcher in. Peabody and Grant manage to survive, but Joseph and Adelaide are believed dead. And she never bothers to correct that. He just says, like, yeah, okay, I'm dead. So Deathstroke and his son now, Grant, go on father and son murdering mission to, like, basically all of North Korea. And they take out everybody. Peabody's working as their man in the chair. And then we cut to current day, where Peabody gives Deathstroke a delivery of an Hawaiian orchid, which was apparently Adeline's favorite flower. And he's like, well, someone's trying to send me a message, but I wonder who. And then we see a home in Miami, Florida, where Adeline and Joseph are both there. And they're like, we will get our revenge on your father, Joseph. And Joseph's like, no, I am not Joseph. He will know the wrath of Jericho. Krakum. Very basic story. I mean, the first half of it was Captain America until it got to the... It's Captain America without the moral compass, honestly. Like, it's good. It's fine. It's exactly what I expected out of Deathstroke, but at the same time, this was setting up the next story. And that's fine if you want to use this as functionality for, okay, we need to set up Adeline and like his family and all that. And that's totally fine, but it's Rob Liefeld. And that's not to say that he is not capable of writing a character in a way that seems emotionally deeper than a puddle, but I have yet to see that. So when he was saying this stuff of like, oh, and I loved him and we grew to love each other, I didn't feel that at all. Genuinely, it felt like a commander and soldier sort of relationship here. But hey, apparently they loved each other. I don't know. It felt very flat to me. I see all the beats and I recognize them as like, oh, okay, that's what happened. But it's like there's no punch to it. It's just a thing of, okay, that's that. Have you also with this? Literally everybody that Deathstroke thought was dead is not dead. So maybe reevaluate some stuff there if you're going to bring back literally every member of his family. I know they are alive in other continuities, but still. So no, overall this one, I just want to give a 5.5. It's not that great on the art, definitely not that great on the story. It's not offensively bad, but it's just like, who cares in the long run? Grifter, number 0, written by Rob Liefeld and Frank Tieri, art by Scott Clark. It's, I guess, an origin story. So we open up with Grifter running on a rooftop with a guy named Lynch and his brother Max. And they're all geared up. And immediately Grifter's like, wait a minute, something about this doesn't seem right. I can't put my finger on it, but something's going on here. Also, this is Team 7 business. So they break into some compound, they start shooting guys, and then Grifter's like, wait a minute, hold on, Max wasn't on Team 7, and Lynch was, but he never geared up. What the heck is going on here? And they make their way into some random place that I guess is bad or whatever. Grifter pulls out his gun, aims it at his brother's head, and then shoots Lynch as well. And when he shoots Lynch, some random dude in a hoodie shows up, and Grifter's like, wait a minute, I know that guy, but I've never met that guy, but I know that guy. And then we see that he's actually in some sort of like VR deep trance thing where he's part of some facility and they're like, okay, so we're trying to, program him to believe certain things. And long story short, these are Daemonites. Daemonites who have kidnapped Cole Cash because they're trying to get him to be a weapon for them against Hellspont. Okay? I'm not saying it again. So then we see the dude in the hoodie who's posing as like a homeless guy or something. He comes up to the Daemonite stronghold. There are some guards outside. He just kicks the crap out of them while one-lining the whole time. Makes his way inside. Takes out all the other guards he finds on the way there. And makes his way to Cole. And he's like, hey, Cole, today's your graduation day. And he shoots out the vat that Cole was being held in, picks him up, and then just jumps out the window with him. And Cole is out of it, but as soon as this guard comes to attack him, he's able to just like high kick this guy in the face and then pass out again. And the hoodie guy explodes the whole Daemonite facility as they make their way away from it in the back of a garbage truck. So hoodie guy makes his way to a hotel. He puts down Cole on a bed and he just tells him like, hey, there's a lot of other people out there like yourself. Not everybody makes it, but I'm going to give you the things you need. Cole's unconscious, mind you. He doesn't hear any of this. So he puts a bag full of, like, you know, a new identity, new documents, stuff like that on Cole's bed and says, like, all right, well, eventually they're going to figure things out and come after you again, and I hope that you're ready for that, because I'm not sure I'm going to be able to help you again, but we'll see each other around, I'm sure. So he as he walks out, Cole wakes up again, and he's like, okay, so I woke up. This happened again. This is now the third time this has happened where I wake up, no idea where I am. There's a note next to me that's signed W, and there's a bag with new documents in it. Well, guess I better get on with it then. And that's just where it leaves off. I don't even know what happened. So he was being programmed by the Daemonites, and then this dude who I guess works either for Hellspawn or on the third side against the Daemonites goes against and like gets him out and then sets him up with a new identity so that the Daemonites can't find him again. That's what I got. That's all I can tell that happened. But like in issue 1 of this series, he was just a grifter. He was just a dude. If he remembers this has happened 3 times already, clearly he would have like more questions. Like this is not something that just happens where you just wake up with a new life at your feet. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a bit too pedantic with it, but it just seems like this directly goes against like the first arc of the story, which admittedly was not written by Rob Liefeld or Frank Tieri, but still, it had to have something, you know? So, I think this is a 6.5. A lot of that is the art. Scott Clark does a fantastic job here playing with shadows and making everything look good. But yeah, writing-wise, if the Zero issues were supposed to be like origin points and like explaining things, this did nothing to explain anything. Did he always have these telekinetic powers that Rob Liefeld introduced, or is that why was the Daemonites putting that into him? I don't know. And this did nothing to help me in that. So I give it a 6.5. It's not good. Suicide Squad number 0, written by Adam Glass, art by Fernando, Dagnino. This is Amanda Waller's origin story of how she came about making the Suicide Squad, because she's already existed long before it in this continuity. So we open up in Malaysia. Some army folks are coming into a bar, and they come across Amanda, who's playing a pinball machine. They say, hey, we need you back in the fold. And she's like, after Team 7, I'm retired. And they're like, Team 7? Ah, shit. And they like start a fight because Team 7 means something, I guess. So then we see Amanda. She turns and faces one of the other guys there, and it's a parent friend that she had named Durin, who she thought was dead. And so they pat each other on the back, have some drinks, catch up with each other. And Amanda basically says, like, yep, nope, I'm out of the game. I'm gone, and I can tell you want some help, so I'm just going to leave before that happens. Bye. And as she tries to leave, he says the name Regulus, who's, of course, the leader of Basilisk. And she's like, all right, fine, let's walk and talk. So they go out on the streets and they talk for a while. And Durin tells her that Regulus has a weapon of mass destruction. And they're going to detonate it somewhere in this town in 24 hours. And that's all they got. So they got to find, the only lead that they have is this guy named Pete Wu, who regularly makes deliveries for Basilisk. So 1 hour later, they got eyes on Pete Wu. They make their way towards him. He manages to see that they're there, and the building that he's going into, he runs in and gives a little bit of warning before they can get in there. They bust in. Place seems to be abandoned, but they do manage to catch Pete. And Amanda does some advanced interrogation on him, and I'm pretty sure slices one of his balls off. I just genuinely, it says, her exact words are, lucky they come in pairs, Pete. Now tell me what I want to know. So anyway, he spits up a flash drive, like literally comes out of his mouth. They put it in the computer and discover, like, yep, there's some sort of bomb design on here. But it turns out it's not like a regular bomb. It's a meta bomb that's going to be doing something spicy because, you know, Basilisk's whole thing is meta-humans. So they set fire to the building, make sure there's no evidence, and then make their way out because they realize that for this thing to go off, Regulus is going to have to be nearby, and he's going to want to watch the fireworks. So Amanda goes off to find Regulus. The rest of them stay around town trying to figure out where the bomb is. And immediately they say goodbye on this bridge, and then immediately are like, hey, what if it's under this bridge? Which it is, but I don't know how they get to it. But regardless, they start diving down for that. Meanwhile, Amanda makes her way up to a nearby mountaintop. She sees a helicopter there, unloads on it, takes it down, explodes in a giant fireball. And then Regulus is right behind Amanda going like, hey, that was my chef. Why'd you kill my chef? And so Amanda, she's got a gun trained on Regulus, and he's like, oh, you know that's not going to work. Also, you unloaded your entire clip into that helicopter, let's be honest. So he just smacks her, knocks her out a little bit, and I guess paralyzes her, so she can't really put up much of a fight. But I don't know why, but she's immediately, it literally says, what did you just do to me? And then he says, I too have changed. And then he reaches out a hand, and then she just headsbutts him and get ready to fight some more. So fight continues on, and Regulus monologues and says his whole plan was like, hey, this meta bomb. A lot of people have the metagene. I want metahumans that I'm trying to recruit, but it's taken too long to recruit the ones who are already metahumans. So I'm just going to set off this bomb, and it's going to make metahumans. And I'm just going to recruit them. And basically the other people are too late to get to the bomb. It does go off, and Regulus manages to escape in all the craziness and explosions and whatnot. Amanda tries calling up her team. They're not answering. She makes her way back down into town, and it's like just a zombie horde down there. Everyone is messed up. But she does manage to see Durin, who seems to be normal from the left side. But as soon as he turns, like half his body is melted off, and he's just like, help me. And so Amanda's like, well, only one way I can help him now. Puts a gun to his head, pulls the trigger. 1 week later, she's going to the Dern family home to report that, your son has died in the line of fire. He died honorably, blah, blah, blah. The mother spits on Amanda and slams the door on her for daring to report such bad news. And Amanda's like, okay, why do good people have to die? Like, that doesn't seem like a good way to do things. And also these metahumans, like, this is all about them. I have an idea. Let's get rid of the bad metahumans. So she goes to her boss in D.C. and says, like, here's the deal. I've got an idea for a new team. And he's like, oh, a new Team 7? And they're like, no, Team 7 sucked. I'm planning a Suicide Squad. Cue the guitar. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's an issue. I think that Amanda Waller has this big amount of mystery on her. I think we still haven't gotten the thing of like who her family is, like who her loved ones are. We're still dealing with that. And to have an issue devoted to her past, especially when I know she's in Team 7 and we're going to get a whole backstory there, I get it. This is more so for Basilisk than I think it is Suicide Squad. This is more so to set up like, no, see, they were a threat and they've always been a threat like this whole time. See? So it's fine in that regard. I don't know. It just kind of fell flat for me. It didn't really have any sort of real like, wow, that was such an amazing revelation, or wow, I really do enjoy this character development. It was just a thing of, yeah, Amanda had some trauma, went through some more trauma, and then started the Suicide Squad. Which, okay, sure. Overall, though, I'd say it's a 7. It's okay. Like, it's not bad. It's just, it's a fine book. And nothing really that great to say about it. Team 7, number 0, written by Justin Jordan, art by Jesús Merino, with Norm Rapmund and Rob Hunter. This book has been talked about in a whole bunch of other books for like weeks, if not months now. So they've really been planning this one out as like, yeah, Team 7, that's where it's all going to change. And in this first issue, it's the recruitment issue. And I don't even know like what the end goal here is. So we open up 5 years ago with a guy named, I have them all written on my paper here, John Lynch, who he's basically just saying like, hey, superheroes are real now. How can humanity compete? What if Superman turned evil? So I'm proposing that we set up a new team. And apparently they tried to do something in Action Comics where, like, the Steel Soldier thing was them. But now they're like, nah, that didn't work. So now we're working on the Majestic Project. But the Majestic Project is not Team 7. Team 7 is just a means to get to the Majestic Project. And we see he's pitching this in some sort of weird cyberspace to these, like, talking cube things that I think are communicators, but I still don't understand what. So anyway, he basically says, yeah, here's the deal. I'm already putting a team together. I've got my 2 best agents out recruiting. And his 2 best agents are Dinah Drake and Kurt Lance, who we open up. They're in some sort of super villain's lair thing that's underwater. And they're busting in. And we see the supervillain. He's like, psh, no one can get to me here. And then the doors open up and Dinah and Kurt just start firing like crazy. And the villain is like, psh, you have nowhere to run. And I have all this security. There's nothing you can possibly do. And they're like, oh, we're just here to deliver a message. And it's like, all right, fine. What's the message? Let's hear it. And it's just like, Lynch wants to know if you remember what happened in Uruguay. And the villain's like, I have no idea what that means. Like, what are you even talking about? To which point we then see that 2 of the security members are Slade Wilson, a.k.a. not quite Deathstroke yet, and Alex Fairchild, a.k.a. the father of Caitlin Fairchild from Superboy and Ravagers. And so they immediately turn on the rest of their security team, knock out the supervillain. I don't think they kill him. In fact, they don't kill anybody, despite the fact that they're taking pretty lethal shots here. But regardless, they're like, okay, all right, so John Lynch is calling in a favor, and he's got a job for us, and so they take it, and they're like, sure, why not? Let's go ahead and see what he's got. Then they cut over to James Bronson, who apparently he just doesn't have anything special about him, except that he's like a really, really, really hard worker, and we see him climbing up a sheer ice wall in a T-shirt, and when he gets up to the top, Dinah's up there, and she's like, hey, I got a question for you. Why do you do all this crazy stuff? And he's like, because I want to be the best. My turn. Who are you? And he's like, I'm Dinah Drake, and I'm here to offer you a part of Team 7. By the way, there are like 10 members to Team 7. I don't know what the 7 means. I have no idea. So anyway, we then cut to a pilot who got like tons of missiles following after them, and Dinah and Kurt are on the comms. So it's like, hey, we can call back later if you want. And the pilot's like, nah, don't worry about it. It's Summer Ramos. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. This doesn't matter. Although, hold on one second. And then the plane just explodes and self-destruct. And they're like, oh my God, she's dead. And then they hear a knocking in Morse code outside of their own plane door, which is saying, let me in. To which Summer is there. And just like, yeah, no, it was all part of a test to see if the self-destruct would get rid of all the missiles. Anyway, you want me as part of a team? And it's just like, yeah, sure, cool, all right. Then we cut to a bar somewhere in France where Cole Cash is roughing up the place. Cole Cash, a.k.a. Grifter. And he's being arrested by the cops for, messing up the place. But as they get into the paddy wagon, Dinah and Kurt are inside, and they're like, hey, we hear that you were good in special ops. We think we've got something that you can really put your efforts into. And he's like, all right, well, I'm all ears. And then we cut to a baseball stadium where there is a terrorist threat going on, and apparently it is by Basilisk, because it's always by Basilisk, but it's not even at the baseball stadium. It's up in a blimp above the baseball stadium. And we see it's Amanda Waller who's saying like, man, you're real smart, but I'm smarter because I'm Amanda Waller and I can see patterns where nowhere else can see them. And so she takes out the terrorist threat, knocks out the bomb, but there's a couple other terrorists who are threatening to like crash the blimp into the place, so they have to make their way up to the driver's room of the blimp, and when they get there, they see Dinah and Kurt are already there, and they're like, hey, Agent Waller. And by the way, there was another guy there named Dean Higgins, who is also a soldier. He was around too. I don't know what he's special at, but they say, hey, you two, welcome to Team 7. So then we cut to, after all those people have been recruited, we're out in space, we're on a spaceship where Lynch is up there and it's just like, okay, here's the deal. There's a superhuman's arms race going on down on Earth. you guys have to fight the good fight in order to counteract that. We've given you all the weapons we think you might need, but we're not sure because superhumans are still new. Remember that. This is 5 years ago. So, all right, let's go Team 7. That's it. It's the recruitment. What to even make of that? I don't. It's fine. It's a recruitment issue. Like, they're just showing off it's that first like 30 minutes of Suicide Squad, the first one, where they just go through and show like, here's what people are good at and here's how they got onto the team. It's just like, okay, I get it. I understand. This issue is necessary. I'm not saying it's not, but it's also not anything special. It's just, here we are. Also, are we going to find out how Dinah and Kurt became a thing here? Because if you remember in the end, Dinah becomes Dinah Lance, a.k.a. Black Canary. So, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I'm not upset with it. It's just a necessary intro that's whatever. So, overall, I'm going to give this one I'll give it a 6.5. I don't dislike particularly anything about it, but with all the hype and buildup of like, yeah, Team 7's on the way, I don't get it yet. So, I'll just wait and see, I guess. Legion Lost number 0, written by Tom DeFalco, art by Pete Woods. This is the origin of Timberwolf, just Timberwolf. We open up in the early 31st century on planet Zune, where Timberwolf is running around beating up bad guys. And they're like, oh my god, it's Timberwolf, everyone run! And he just bulldozes through them and he's like, I do feel bad about what I'm doing sometimes. Let me think about my past. And then the whole thing is him. As a child, he's with his mom and dad. His dad's a scientist. His mom is also a scientist, but the dad's more focused, I guess. And he's like, honey, could you help me out? I have a presentation coming up I need your help with. And Timberwolf's there, and she's like, oh, Bryn, because his name is Bryn. He's like, oh, Bryn, it's a big day for all of us. We're going to be able to finally make some real forward momentum with our work if we can get this going. And we'll celebrate with a picnic in the park. So you can tell something's going to go wrong. Sometime later, we see the presentation, and his father is presenting it to Lord Vicor, who, with a name like that, you just know isn't good. But regardless, he's got a little rodent that is just infected with like every form of cancer, and he injects it with his new wonder drug, and it immediately heals up. And not only heals up, it is now like better, faster, stronger too. So immediately Vicor's like, that's fantastic. Great job. You've really done great work with my money. Make up a few more so I can use it on myself and my men. And the dad's like, human trials are still like a good year away. And then we got to go through the space equivalent of the FDA in order to mass produce. And he's like, well, do you think maybe you could speed it up if you had some motivation? And he shoots his wife. Vicor shoots Bryn's father's wife, Bryn's mom. And he's just like, what did you do? And he's like, just use it on her. You could save her life if you move fast enough. But then, like, she, like, straight up dies, like, immediately. Like, there's no time that would be able to work. And so Vicor's like, well, I'm sure you'll do better next time. Remember, you have a son. I'm going to be back in a month. And if you don't have it all ready to go by then, I'm going to kill him. Also, you're not allowed to leave the building. Bye. So then the next 3 weeks go by with his dad, like, muttering into himself. And Bryn's like, Daddy, my mom died. And he's like, yeah, I know, son, but it'll all be okay soon. And he injects himself with some of his own cure, as well as he injects Bryn. And he's like, remember, we got to have a plan here. We can't let Vicor win. We just can't. So the month finally ends, and by the way, it's Bryn Londo. So he's like, Dr. Londo, are you here? Where are you? And the doctor opens up the door, and he's like, oh, I'm here, but I bet you didn't expect me to do this. And he, like, immediately lunges at Vicor, and Vicor's entire crew just unloads on him. Just like, no, actually, we very much expected you to do that. So do you have another vial somewhere before you bleed out to death? And before he's able to do anything, Bryn comes down from the rafters and just starts tearing apart Vicor and his crew. Like, he's fully attacking. And immediately the doctor's like, okay, Bryn, you gotta go. Get out of here. Like we discussed, I'm gonna join your mom. And Bryn's like, no, Daddy, no. And he's like, do it. So he's about to self-destruct the place. Bryn manages to escape, and Vicor manages to get his hands on one last little vial of serum, and then seemingly, does he escape? Does he not escape? He escapes. And for the next however many years, Bryn was forced to live down on the streets, down in the bad part of town, and he was constantly finding himself fighting for those who couldn't defend themselves, using his superhuman abilities that he gained from the serum. And he's constantly been looking for Vicor the whole time, and he's going up against people, and finally he gets word of somebody who's like a dealer under Vicor, and he's like, tell me where he is, tell me where I can get to him. And then all of a sudden a bright spotlight shone on him, and turns out this was part of like a police undercover thing. And he's like, you just blew 3 years of undercover work. Wait a minute, hold on, are you the vigilante known as the Timberwolf? And he's like, yeah, maybe, shut up. And he's like, yeah, okay, hey, if you're going after Vicor, like, if you know where he is, just call us, because we can break the cycle of violence. Like, you don't got to kill him. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, bye. And he just disappears. And so he keeps on looking, but he keeps that in mind. He's like, maybe I should break the cycle of violence. But in the end, he does find Vicor, breaks in through his window, and Vicor's like, oh my God, dude, I've been leaving you breadcrumbs for like years. How did it take you this long to find me? You are like a shit detective. Anyway, I have a son now, and I've trained him to fight against you, so he's going to kill you now. And so a big fight breaks out. But before, like, the fight even really starts, immediately Timberwolf is like, no, I'm not doing the one-on-one thing. Like, anytime I knock down your son, I'm going to come after you immediately. So Vicor's having to put up a fight as well, using his gun and whatever. And Vicor tries justifying. He's like, oh, I paid for that research. It belonged to me. Your father had no right. And he's like, what right did you have to kill my mother? So anyway, Timberwolf finally gets into a one-on-one fight with the son of Vicor. And he just goes all out. And as the narration says, because it's a third-person narration, it's just like, truly they were equally matched physically, but Timberwolf lived on the streets, so he had that going for him. And in the end, he's about to kill Vicor's son. And then Vicor's like, wait, please, he's my son. Take me instead. And Timberwolf, he has a moment of moral crises, but he ends up calling the science police, and they're like, you did the right thing, son. And he's like, I highly doubt that. He's like, well, you got superpowers, huh? And he's like, yep. He's like, you want to join the Legion of Superheroes? I could write you a reference letter. And he's like, no, that sounds stupid. Bye. And he just runs off. That's it. I liked it. I think it was, Timberwolf is by far the least interesting member of the Legion Lost for me. Like, I think I'm more interested in pretty much everybody else more than him. So the fact that we managed to focus on him for this, it's like, okay, I guess. You want him to be your Wolverine, make him your Wolverine. But I was still I didn't care that much for Timberwolf. This adds at least a little bit of depth, but it is falling issue to the fact of I didn't care about him going into it, so there was only so much you could make me care going out of it. But it was a fine issue. It did a good job. It set up the plot. It set up the characters. Of course, he had the tragedy of, he was experimented on, and he grew up on the streets, and his parents were murdered in front of him. By God, he's hitting all of them. So I'm going to give this one I give it a 7. It's good. It's not great. It's just another issue of Legion Lost. The Ravagers number 0, written by Howard Mackie, art by Ian Churchill and Norm Rapmund. This is kind of an origin story for all the Ravagers, but mostly Beast Boy and Terra. So we open up in a harvest facility. Some young boy is tied up to a big old operating table thing. And he's like, hello? Is anyone? Where am I? And they start doing some voices off screen or saying like, oh, it's time to mess with his DNA. So they hit him with some gamma beam or something like that. And he's like, please stop. I don't feel good. And then he starts morphing into like different animal looking things. And his skin turns red. And wouldn't you know it, this is Garfield. This is Beast Boy. So everyone's like, wow, okay. So what happened there as we see it's Harvest and the rest of his evil whatevers. And they're like, seems that his metagene activated when we did that, and he now has a connection to some sort of red energy field. And it's like, cool, give me more info on that. All right, next one. And they cut to this young blonde girl. Her name is Tara Markov, And instead of doing genetic stuff on her, they're like, hey, what if we just put her into an extremely life or death situation and wait for the metagene to activate naturally? So they put her in a cave, and then they trigger a huge rock fall, and she's completely buried alive. And then all of a sudden the rocks start moving one at a time, and Tara manages to pull herself out. And it's just like, oh, okay. So we can do it that way too. Cool. Well, good job. And that's Harvest the whole time. He's like, yeah, no, keep going with it. So the next day we see they're still operating on Beast Boy, trying to figure out where his powers come from. They still can't quite tap into the energy field. And then we go to the other ones, where we see the twins, Thunder and Lightning, and they have the ability of sound and lightning. And then there's Ridge, who they say everything that they throw at him, his body just absorbs. So, yeah. They don't, I don't even know how to... They just say everything. I don't know what that means. But regardless, yeah, now he's whatever. So, all right, cool. So let's put everybody into our little Thunderdome, okay? So they throw everybody in. And immediately everyone's like, all right, so are we supposed to stay together? Are we supposed to fight? What's going on? And some of them have some memories. Some of them can't even remember their names. And then we get to Kevin, who is the dude with one eye from the culling. And he's like, man, you guys are all still vaguely human looking, and I'm not anymore. I have one eye, so I don't want any part of anything to do with you. Ridge, you're cool. You can come with. But everyone else, piss off, especially you, Beast Boy. And it's like, why me? I don't want to... What did I do? And it's just like, I heard you crying, and it made me sick. And he just starts beating up Beast Boy. And then Tara steps in, throws some dirt in his eye, and says, yeah, step off. You better not do that anymore, Kevin. And Kevin's like, psh, this isn't over yet. So then Tara turns back to Beast Boy and says, hey, you need to step it up. You need to actually get something, or else I might be the one to take you out next time. So then we go to, by the way, they're all called Phase 5 recruits. I don't know if that'll come up, but regardless, they go to the pit, where they're immediately forced in and are forced to fight, a la Thunderdome. And they're about to drag Beast Boy in, but Tara steps up again, and it's just like, hey, he's not going to put on a good show. Let me in there. I'll show what's up. And it's just like, cool, we're going to put both of you in there. So they toss both of them into the pit, and inside is Kevin, and he's got a cool mechanical upgrade, and they fight. And it seems like Kevin has the upper hand to start. And Beast Boy, he sees her getting beat up, and he's like, no, I have to help. All I've been doing is hiding and running, but now I must fight. And he turns into a giant tiger and jumps down into the pit to defend Tara, taking the name of Beast Boy. I don't know if he was called that before. I doubt it, because he didn't have the powers. But, he just says, they call me Beast Boy. So, I don't know. Regardless, they start fighting. A whole bunch of other, mutated people show up. The guards are saying, hey, anyone who kills both of them gets double rations for lunch. Let's go. So they all start trying to attack, but then Tara unleashes her geokinesis, and Beast Boy turns into an elephant. And Harvest watch on. He's like, oh boy, these guys. Oh man, if we can just get their power under control, we can use them truly as an element for the Ravagers and for me, Harvest, and the culling and whatnot. And yeah, he basically just leads into oh, once they're ready, once we get some more, the culling will begin. And that's where it leaves off. So all this did was basically give us the origin of Beast Boy and Tara, because everything else we had gotten before, either through them telling us or actually have shown us what happened. So the only thing that happened here is now we know how Beast Boy got his powers, how Tara got hers, and that why they became friends and that they defended each other, which is not an insignificant thing to cover in an issue 0. It's fine. But I really hate the culling. I think that's what it comes down to. It's it just keeps reminding me that the culling was, and will always be a thing, and that Harvest is still around, and it just pisses me off. So nothing, I guess, that much against the 0 issue within its own right, but just let Harvest die. I'm begging you, please. I'm so tired of this. So overall, I'm going to give this a... I don't know. It's it's not a bad issue, but it's just the implications of it. So I'm going to say 6.5 and leave it at that because I don't need to explain it anymore. Demon Knights number 0, written by Paul Cornell, art by Bernard Chang. This is ostensibly Etrigan's origin story, along with Jason Blood and how they became linked. So we see long ago in Hell, there is Etrigan, and he, of course, there's the whole thing that they set up that, like, demons sometimes rhyme, and, like, it's a part of certain tribes of demons or something like that. Regardless, Etrigan's coming up, and he's representing Lucifer, and he has to get 2 other demons to open up the gate for Lucifer's carriage. And he's like, oh, hey, you represent Lucifer? Okay, name off your master's titles. And so he's like, oh, my great lord Lucifer, fall into glory, ruler of Lucifer. And he's not able to make a rhyme. So at that point, Lucifer steps out, and he's like, Etrigan, you suck. Hey, demons, let me in. Like, get out of the way. And he, like, literally, like, disintegrates them. And he makes his way in there. And Etrigan is being more or less taunted by this other demon, who it seems like only job is to taunt Etrigan. And Etrigan's like, man, this sucks. Lucifer doesn't understand. Like, if he could just give me a chance. But you know what? I'm going to show him just how awesome of a demon I am. I'm going to raise him hell. So then we cut to Camelot, where Jason Blood is working as a scribe underneath Merlin. And Merlin's like, hey, I need you to copy this note for all of Britain in order to tell them to watch for beasts. Need it done like 100 times. And he's like, 100 times? Get the other scribes to help. He's like, no, you're the only one I trust to do it 100 times perfectly. No using magic, by the way. And so Jason loses his crap, kicks a table, and he's just like, man, I should be writing my own books. How dare you make me do this? So Merlin goes and he talks to Arthur. And Arthur's like, look, Merlin, you're being a little bit of a dick to the guy. Like, he's a good kid. He was an orphan. Maybe if you were just a little bit nicer to him, you would be able to see. And Merlin's like, look, I get that, but, like, there are terrible things. But I will try to be a little bit nicer. And as they do so, Merlin's, like, office explodes. And we see Jason was trying to use magic, but failing at it. And he goes and he freaks out. He puts his hand on Arthur, to which point Merlin's like, you broke the rules now. So then we go down to Etrigan, and Etrigan's like, hey, dangerous tribe of demons. I'm coming up, and I say I'm challenging the current leader for leadership of the tribe. And when we win, you guys are going to help me march against Lucifer. And the leader of the tribe's like, yeah, okay, let's see it. But you got to keep up the rhyming. And, like, the whole time he is keeping up the rhyming. But he takes out the leader. He's like, cool, now I'm your leader. And then another guy steps up and he's like, actually, I was second in command, and I'm going to go ahead and claim my rightful place. So then Etrigan knocks him out immediately and says, like, all right, next. And he just goes through, and there's one guy who's talking to the demon who just made fun of Etrigan, and he's like, is your friend just going to be doing this all day? And he's like, yeah, probably. Like, I see no reason why he would stop. So then we go to Jason, who's been put in the jail because, of course, he laid hands on Arthur. And Xanadu, who at that point is still named Nimue. Still don't know how to pronouncely say that. Naimu. He's like, oh, you being cynical with me, saying that, I'm burdened with such horrible, like, fate or whatever. And it's just like, yeah, no, Jason, you get over yourself. Like, you're only in here for a night. Like, who cares? But, like, you are going to do wonderful things. You just got to actually put in the time, okay? But you're never going to have to worry about your anger or anything like that. I'm always here for you. So then we see Merlin and Arthur going down, and Arthur is once again saying, like, maybe just, like, look into the boy's future. How about that? Go see what the boy's destined for, and then make your judgments about him. So Merlin goes out and talks to Morgan Le Fay, because she is apparently really good at seeing the future, and that's kind of her thing. And he's like, hey, look, my boy is dating your sister, and it's worth seeing how they turn out. And so she looks into Jason's future, and she sees that if he's not given some sort of great purpose, he's going to lash out and end up killing Xanadu. And he's like, all right, so I guess I got to give him a great purpose now. God damn it. All right, fine. Thanks for nothing. And he just walks away. And then Morgan Le Fay is like, yeah, well, Camelot's about to be destroyed. I didn't tell you that much, you dick. So then we see back down in hell, Etrigan has managed to take out like a whole bunch more demons. And he's like, anybody else? And the one demon steps up and he's like, I'm next in line. Nobody here would argue that. But I've seen your talent. I've seen your ability. And I pledge my loyalty to you along with the rest of the tribe. And then it's like, cool, great, let's do it. So then Lucifer's looking on and he sees that Etrigan's actually managed to gain a bunch of demons from a bunch of different tribes. And he's like, oh, could Etrigan actually like manage to do something here? That would at least make things fun for a while. But before any of that can come to pass, Merlin steps into the gates of hell. And he's like, hey, Dad, because apparently Merlin is Satan's son. I didn't know that. But regardless, he's like, yeah, I have an idea. I've come for a bargain. So we see Etrigan is finally leading his attack on Lucifer. And before he gets too close, Lucifer comes out and he's like, hey, I'm here. Etrigan, here's the thing. You still suck, and I'm going to show you just by doing this. And he just conjures up a portal. And Etrigan's like, what's this? It's like, it's a portal of the mortal realm. Bye. And he just tosses Etrigan in, closes the portal. And then all the other demons are like, oh, dear God, Lucifer, I didn't mean it. So then we cut back to Etrigan, who's now in a cage in Merlin's office. And he's like, all right, look, here's the thing. I've been trying to figure out how I'm supposed to do this properly, and this is only guesswork, so hopefully I have some time to deal with this. But then as soon as that happens, Arthur comes in and says, Camelot's being attacked, ready the forces. And Merlin's like, crap, all right, send me Jason. So Jason's sent to the room, and he's like, oh, but Master, the demons, you have to flee, or the Camelot's being attacked. Also, you have a demon, but you have to flee. And he's like, yeah, sure. Anyway, magic spell, combine these two, and he mixes the two together. And then we see that Etrigan is able to talk to Jason and vice versa. And basically, Etrigan's like, as soon as you let me transform, as soon as you pull me back into your body, because by the way, Etrigan was thrown down into the 9th layer of hell, and he has to climb his way the whole way back up if he ever wants to fight Lucifer again. So he's like, if you ever let me transform, I'm going to kill you and everybody you love. And he's like, if you do that, I'm going to commit suicide, and then you'll be trapped in the 9th layer of hell. It's like, fine, I guess we have a truce where we're not going to kill each other's loved ones or selves. And so we then see, they travel the earth and many adventures were had. And Jason kind of liked being the hero. Etrigan never quite wanted to, but that's where they're at. And we'll see what happens in the future. So yeah, it's a good little story. I still am a little unclear on the whole rhyming thing, but they do a good job of setting in certain tribes of demons just rhyme, and it's like posh, I guess. So no, it's a solid story. The art is fantastic. I really don't have any real qualms about it. So I would say this one's like an 8. I think it's extremely well done. I don't think there's any real major issues about it. The only thing is that it's just an origin issue, and it's kind of like we already saw him merge with him. So that part was whatever. It was just the first part where we saw... Honestly, Etrigan's half of the first half was really most of what that 8 is. So, yeah. Frankenstein, Agent of S.H.A.D.E, number 0, written by Matt Kindt, art by Alberto Ponticelli. This is just the creation of Frankenstein and how he joined S.H.A.D E. So we open up in 1823, Dr. Victor Frankenstein's castle, and we see that it's all told via the narrative of S.H.A.D.E.net and their files on the matter. And we see that Dr. Frankenstein had made a generator that is powered by souls, and that he's sacrificing these animals and even humans to the cause. And we see him create Frankenstein. He's just waking him up and saying, now, are you more than an animal? Is there any sort of man in there? And before anything can really be said or done, Frankenstein breaks out, seeing the cruelty of all the people that were killed in order to create him, and immediately goes out and just starts ripping off the arms and whatever of his captors. Victor manages to, I don't think escape, but I think he's just knocked out for the moment. But Frankenstein hears Victor's wife Elizabeth upstairs, and he decides to head up. And all these people that were captured by Victor are being released by Frankenstein. They're all just running out of the house, and Elizabeth's like, who are these people? What's going on? Oh my God, what are you? Are you a monster? And Frankenstein, able to speak, he's like, no, I'm no more of a monster than your husband, but please know that he is the one who has killed innocent people and locked them in your basement, and now they're out in the world. And it's like, oh, but it's freezing outside. There's a blizzard. They'll never make it. You have to go save them. And so Frankenstein goes out to save those innocent people on the behest of Elizabeth. And then Elizabeth turns back, sees Victor all bloodied and broken. He's like, you dick. You're a dick. I hate you. And just like leaves Victor. And Victor's like, you've taken everything from me, my monster. I will make it right. So at this point, S.H.A.D.E says like when they showed up there, it was too late. Victor was gone. But they did manage to harvest some useful material from Elizabeth. Or it says that they extracted Elizabeth and gathered useful raw material. I think that means they killed Elizabeth, because the next thing is that they made the Bride of Frankenstein. So, yeah. Then they just show that Frankenstein was fighting off some monsters or whatever. Some time passed, and Victor got together a band of crazy, kooky-looking steampunk pirates to go into the deep woods, I believe, in the New World. Well, it's 1823. South America, and they're going looking for something, and the pirates are like, I'm sure it's nothing, but let this crazy guy pay us, sure. Meanwhile, down in South America, an uncontacted tribe stumbles across Frankenstein, who's just meditating out in the woods, and they welcome him into the tribe and explain to him that they're being attacked by this weird tentacle monster at night that's stealing their young ones. So Frankenstein sits and waits for it to attack. He fights back against it and ends up killing it, to which the tribe then welcomes him as one of their own. And for a brief period of time, he's genuinely happy. And the S.H.A.D.E says, like, we were supposed to come in at this point to get him into S.H.A.D.E, but some paperwork got mixed up. So then this next part happened. And then Victor's pirate group arrives and kills every single one of the natives, and pulls out Frankenstein and is just like, hey, you took everything from me, and now I'm going to kill you. And Frankenstein's just like one-shotting all these pirates. He's like, you're not going to be able to do that. I am far too powerful for you to take down. And at this point, he pulls out some sort of steam-powered gun. Frankenstein and him go over a cliff, down into a river, over a waterfall, and then wash up on the shorebed. And he's like, I created you. What do you have to say to your god? And Frankenstein's like, shut up, and just backhands him. And at that point, he sits down, exhausted, on the riverbank. And this woman comes out of the woods wearing a mask. And Frankenstein says, who are you? And the woman says, you can call me Father. It's Father Time. And so Father Time recruits Frankenstein into S.H.A.D.E. We see him fighting in multiple wars, fighting giant Nazi spiders, taking out nuclear warheads as they are flying across the ocean, and overall doing some crazy monster killing stuff. And says he is an agent to fight fear with fear, an agent of justice to fight evil, an agent of S.H.A.D.E to fight the shadows. And that's Frankenstein. That's how he got involved. Yeah, nothing in here really surprised me. I don't think there was anything that was really like, wow, okay, didn't know that about Frankenstein. It did honestly feel like, okay, it's not the story of Frankenstein, obviously, but it is fitting in line with everything we know about this character, DC's version of Frankenstein, and it's good. It's a very fine issue. I don't really have much more to say about it. I mean, it's an okay issue. It set up things that it wanted to set up. It did the whole Victor revenge plot that it built up. I mean, it's just a fine issue. It's not doing anything amazing. It's just here's how Frankenstein came to be. So overall, I'm going to go ahead and say it's a 7. It's good. It's not blowing me away. It's just, yeah, that's what I expect Frankenstein to do. So, yeah. Resurrection Man number 0, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, art by Ramon Box and Jesús Saiz. This is the final issue, and it is also an origin, so hey, got that going for it. So last issue, Mitch Shelley finally met up with himself, apparently the original Mitchell Shelley that he somehow has some of the memories of. And this issue just explains how everything happened. So we pick up, and their technology, their little nanobot stuff, the tektites that are inside of them are just immediately interfering with each other, and our Mitch Shelley is able to pick up the memories of this new one to get a more complete picture. And we see 5 years ago, exactly as we saw it in that earlier issue, there was an attack on them. They were seriously injured, and when they got back to the hospital, Mitch basically said, okay, everybody gets injected with the tektite solution in order to see like how it affects people. That's just what we're doing right now. We see that the injured involved his partner Hooker and the two that would eventually become the body doubles. So we see that they are trying to, they put everybody in surgery when they get back. They reattach Mitch's arm to his body, and a few weeks pass, 6 weeks, and they're starting to see what the side effects are. So Mitch he's fully healed up, but his arm still feels extremely weak. Looker, he is regenerative, or he is recovered, but he doesn't regenerate, so he still has horrible scars from the attack all over his body. And we see the body doubles have extremely high healing and regeneration, but they also have just enhancement in general reflexes and reaction times. And we see them in a training battle room where they are hit by explosions and then they immediately just get up and keep on shooting. And of course they do a thing where like their clothes burn off and it's like tee hee. So at that point, Mitch's arm goes into an intense amount of pain. He collapsed on the ground and everyone's like, uh-oh, I think it was a graft rejection. We're going to have to see if we can save his arm. So they end up detaching it. They look at it and it's like, I mean, the arm still looks healthy. It was at least there, but like, oh my God, what is that? And inside of the arm is another smaller little baby arm growing out of it. He was literally growing another arm via the tektite. So they take the first arm and they just send it to the incinerator, to which it gets incinerated. But the tektite solution itself does not. And therefore, when it finally comes down in the form of rain outside the smokestacks, it starts to regenerate. And when it reassembles, it regenerates a full version of Mitch Shelley, one that has superpowers. So he doesn't have any real memories, and he just starts making his way out through the woods. And that's how everything happened there. But then we get a little flash forward where the body doubles believe that Mitch Shelley died in like the boss version. He died, but there's someone who looks a lot like him now going around with superpowers, and the body doubles are in charge of cleaning it up. But Hooker knows the truth the whole time, that Mitch Shelley is alive, but just barely clinging to life, and he needs that version of Mitch Shelley in order to figure out how to save his own life, like dismantle him and see how he ticks. So that's everything. So then we get into a very, very brief little fight scene where our Mitch Shelley just uses his, I think it's lava powers, to just like one-shot Mitchell Shelley inside of his mech suit. And Mitchell's like, oh, what now? You're going to kill me? You're just a copy. And he's like, no, I'm better than you in every single way. You are morally bankrupt, and I at least have something I'm worth fighting for. But then before anything can happen, force field comes up around the pair of them. Nobody else can get in. And we see that his timer is up. Heaven and hell are both coming to claim. And all the body doubles are trying to get in. Kim Rebecca's trying to get in. But nobody can make any progress. And so the demon and the angel are there, and it's just like, all right, which is going to be heaven or hell? You can't break a contract. And Mitch is like, take that guy. Take the other version of me. Take the one that's crippled and dying and a douchebag. And the angel's like, yeah, that fits my contract. I only needed the guy who matched the name and the DNA. So yoink. And he takes away Mitchell Shelley. And then the angel's like, wait, why aren't you going after Mitch Shelley? He's like, I got my own thing. And the angel's like, oh, did you trick me? Oh, son of a bitch. And he's like, hey, get out of here. You got your contract. So the soul of Mitchell Shelley is taken by the angels and brought up to heaven, I guess. Meanwhile, Mitch Shelley, the force field comes down. The demon's still hanging around. And the demon teleports Mitch and Kim Rebecca just away back to, I think it's Kim's place. And the body doubles look at each other and it's like, hey, all of our bosses are dead. Maybe we should get into like freelance work. Let's get out of here. So then the final page is they're back at Kim's place and the demon's like, here's the deal. You get more powerful every time you die. And that is like super interesting, and I got plans for you, Mitch Shelley, so I'm going to let you live. Okay, bye. And that's the end. That's just where the series ends. So, I really did enjoy this series. I really did think it was a solid run the whole way through. It had its mysteries. It's had its good stuff. That being said, I don't think this was the best wrap-up. Mainly in that, like, last page where it's just the demon brings him back and says, like, now you get to live. Okay, bye. And then, like, there's not even a word here from Kim. There's not a word from Mitch. There's nothing. It's just a thing of, like, tune in next time, but there's not a next time. So, I mean, they do have a never ever the end. If he shows up elsewhere, fine, great, cool, but it's the end of this book. So I do wish there was a bit more of like a satisfying ending there in terms of, yes, you've wrapped up this particular plot, you've gotten answers, but like, it just didn't feel like an emotional ending. It didn't feel like it had any sort of like, and now we part with these characters. It's just a thing of like, nah, you'll see them around probably, I guess. And if we do, great, but it's not here. So overall, I would give the series a much higher mark, but this particular issue, I got to give like just a flat 7 in that I like what they did. The art was fine the whole way through. I didn't have any problems with that. It was just a, you know, kind of a letdown after all that to be a, okay, well, I hope we'll see you again. Bye. Just wanted a little bit more, I guess. The S.H.A.D.E. number 12, the final issue, written by James Robinson, art by Gene Ha. This is essentially the ending to the story, but also it is the origin. It is telling us how S.H.A.D.E. came to get his shadow powers. So we open up with S.H.A.D.E., or rather Richard Swift, as he was before that, being tied up to this cross-looking object. And basically saying, like, just do it. Just kill me now. If you're not going to let me see my family again, just end it already. And it was 1838, and we see a few weeks earlier, he was in London, and he enjoyed London. He had a successful business. He was an importer. He found things for people and brought them into London. He had a family, a wife, and 2 sons that he loved. He was a bit partial to his older son rather than his youngest, but his youngest was still a newborn, so wasn't really much to talk to the son about at that point, but he just goes over how much he absolutely loves spending time with his family and how much time he wished he could have spent afterwards. But then he gets into talking about how the events actually played out. And the first person he talks about is his good friend Charles Dickens. Yes, that Charles Dickens. And he would have plenty of conversations with Charles about the stories and things like that, until one day during one of their conversations at his business, a man walks in named Culp, who, he's a dwarf. He comes in, he has a beautiful wife who is a mute, and Charles is immediately taken by the wife, but of course that's not going to end in anything well. But Culp comes up and basically says, like, now here's the deal. You are an importer, Mr. Swift. I will give you an exorbitant sum of money if you can bring me a real live lion. It needs to be alive, and it needs to be a lion. And he's like, oh, I mean, sure, why not? And he said it would take some time, but he agreed to the deal. And during that time, he got to talking to Mr. Culp, and Culp shared these stories of adventure all over the different continents. And he admits he's never been to Africa, but he had stories from the Mediterranean Sea, all the way up to like the far north. Like, he had all these stories, and Richard was completely enraptured by it. But Charles Dickens knew there was something wrong with Culp, and he was like, no, his wife, I feel like his wife is unable to cry out for help. He's just not a good man. Richard, why can't you see that? And turns out that there's a character in the old curiosity shop named Dick Swiveller, who is an easily misled man because it was written at this same period that Richard was being misled by Culp. But regardless, he continued his job of trying to get the lion. In July, he managed to get one to London, but unfortunately it died during the journey. So during September, they tried again, and they did get another one. So at the end of September, he got the lion in, and Culp was just absolutely delighted by it, and he insisted that Richard attend a gala that this lion was going to be featured at. And it's like, oh, yes, of course. So him and Charles both went because Charles was saying that he was going to keep an eye out because he didn't trust this event. But when they get there, Charles, two other unknown people, and Richard were all tied up. And essentially this whole thing was a sacrifice. And Culp explained, like, Richard, I hate you. I hated every moment of you. Like, I'm stuck out here walking the earth, like down in the dirt. I have to work. I listen to these sailors talk about their adventures at the bars. And then there you are with your happy family, and you're so successful and all that. I literally hate you, and that's why I've tricked you into becoming a sacrifice here. Because here's the deal. I believe in the dark arts. I believe in magic. And I am going to sacrifice you to a god, a goddess of witchcraft, whatever it is. Her name is, Scathach. Hard to say. But I'm going to sacrifice you so that I can have power. I can finally be one of the upper people. And this Scathach specifically requested you. Once I started talking to you, I had a dream. It came to me in a dream that you were to be the one sacrificed. So Charles at this point is like, I told you, Richard. And Richard's like, yeah, sorry. Oh, well. And he cast the spell and immediately... Oh, and the whole reason for the lion was that the lion... It has to be a primal kill, and this lion is going to be released and feed on Richard and the other captives. So he sends out some bones from a bag. Immediately, some shadows start spreading, and something goes wrong, at least in the way that Culp did not mean it to. And at that point, the shadows engulf Richard, and we see him immediately become the Shade. But what felt like a moment to us was apparently years for him. And he thought about his family, he thought about his wife and his children, and instantly the memories just started ebbing away. Like it was memories of a different person. And he doesn't remember immediately what happened next, but he does get recounted it later on, that he took Charles and he just threw him out of the fight. He managed to put him up on the rafters, and Culp managed to escape, somehow getting his own shadow powers. But everyone else in that room, from Culp's wife to all the people who were watching on, who were part of his weird little magic cult, all of them were immediately killed by Shade's shadow magic, including the lion. They specifically make mention. So at that point, Shade basically, he just removes himself from the world. He just walks out. He has no memory of who he was, where he came from, anything like that. When he did finally get to be some of his memories back, he made it clear, like, you know, I should leave my family alone, not show them this monster I've become. And he just started a life elsewhere as the Shade instead of Richard Swift. And we cut back to modern day where he's recounting this, and he says, you know, like, yeah, I made mistakes. I probably should have been there for my family because maybe they wouldn't have gone down this darker path if I had been there for them. But I still view that Richard Swift as a different person. It's not who I am, it's who I was. I'm now the Shade, but the Shade can be better as well. The Shade can be something more than he was before, now that I have a greater understanding as to my own weaknesses and my own faults. So that's where it leaves off. That's the Shade. I gotta say, I like it. I definitely do enjoy it as a whole series. I do think it would probably play better if I had read Starman prior, or at least were familiar with the character from Starman. As it stands on its own, this did just feel like a sort of globe-trotting action-adventure sort of story. And then this last issue only really plays if you were really wondering about the Shade's origin. Like, it didn't do anything in terms of development, really. It just said, like, no, here's how he came to be. And it strikes me more as that would have worked more if I was into Starman, where I had been exposed to this character but never found out, like, where the hell did he come from. But I can recognize that it is a good story. I can recognize that it is well written. The art is fantastic. It does a great job characterizing and, like, really playing with a balance of action and philosophy, and just, here's a person who is essentially a god and cannot be defeated. So how do they play things out? So I like it. I do definitely enjoy it. I'll give this particular issue, I'll give a 7.5. I don't know where that really stands in terms of previous ratings, but it was a good series. And I think for fans of Starman, it's definitely going to be a lot better than it is for someone going in blind, but it was still definitely good on its own without that knowledge from Starman. And that's it. That's all the comics that came out from DC Comics this September 12th, 2012. And like I said at the beginning, very packed week. Not a lot I can really talk about here at the end, but Team 7 was something, wasn't it? I'm going to keep harping on this because DC was really forcing it down my throat for a while there. Anyway, let's talk about the books that are coming out next week, shall we? We have 14 more comics, all number zeros, and they are from Batwoman, Birds of Prey, Catwoman, Nightwing, Red Hood and the Outlaws, Supergirl, Green Lantern New Guardians, Captain Atom, DC Universe Presents, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Blue Beetle, Legion of Superheroes, and a brand new series, Sword of Sorcery, featuring Amethyst from Gem World. That's who it is. Additionally, that Justice League number 0 is a issue of Shazam. So if you haven't been checking out the Shazam backup in previous 5th weeks, by all means, go back and check that out if you want to be caught up. So, yeah, that's basically it for me. Let me go ahead and tell you where you can find me on Twitter, at DC Comics Podcast. That is all one word, at DC Comics Podcast. Additionally, we have a Patreon. That is Mild Fuzz TV, all one word, Mild Fuzz TV. I don't really care what you do with any of that information. Share it, spread it, keep it to yourself. Doesn't matter to me. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, listening, and or however it is you consume this podcast. I hope to see you next week, and always try to remember, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.